Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today's session is third in a four-part series where we'll explore various concepts that will help us learn and implement successful DevOps transformation. In today's session, we will learn the various deployment patterns such as blue-green deployment, Canary Releases, A/B testing, continuous experiment mindset, designing processes to capture end-user satisfaction, capturing and analyzing feedback, and automating application analytics, and much, much more. My name is Hassan Mohsini. I'm the program manager at Microsoft Reactor Abu Dhabi. Microsoft Reactors are hubs for founders and developers to meet, learn, and connect to local peers, as well as industry-leading ideas and technology from Microsoft partners and the open source community. It's also the home to the Microsoft for Startups program, with a diverse mix of hands-on workshops, expert panels, and community events. There's something for everyone. Check out our calendar of events on meetup.com and join our upcoming sessions. We continued the journey on DevOps with Anthony Prem. Anthony is an Azure technical trainer at Microsoft, specialized in Azure infrastructure and applications. He's passionate about technology and how it can solve complex business problems. He keeps his customers up for success by providing deep technical advisory and strategic consulting through his trainings. Keep the Q&A tab open. I will be sharing some resources during today's session and some learning modules for you to continue the journey after this session. And also, I'll drop the links to the past two episodes. If you have missed it, you can catch it on YouTube. The session is recorded and it will be available later on the channel. You can send us also your questions throughout the session on the Q&A tab, and we will have stops to answer these questions. I would now like to hand over the mic to Anthony to take us through this DevOps journey.
Thank you, Hussam, for the welcome note. Hello, everyone. Welcome to DevOps Learning Series. Please share my screen. Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Prem, works for Microsoft. Today, we are into third part of DevOps Learning Series, where we are going to discuss a lot about deployment patterns and the implementing the right feedback mechanism. So let's do a quick recap on what we have discussed so far. In the first episode, we looked at the fundamentals of DevOps transformation, and we explored the various DevOps services such as Azure Board, Azure Repo, pipelines, test plans, and artifacts. So we basically got a good understanding about the overall DevOps concept. Then in the second episode, we take a look at the source control, how to manage the source control and how to implement the pipeline. And we had a simple source code which we have published into the Azure repo. Then we created the pipeline and we deployed from the build to release. And we also looked at the various concepts about the branching, pull request, and so on. Today, we are going to talk a lot about deployment patterns and how to implement the various feedback mechanisms to collect the feedback from your applications and how you can improve your overall products. So let's talk about deployment pattern. What is deployment pattern and why this is required? So deployment pattern is basically, it's an automated way to smoothly roll out your new features to your users. So if you look at this picture, there are 4 stages, which is starting from the development, then testing, then staging and production, which means if you develop a new feature, so initially you test it on the dev environment, then you slowly roll out into the test environment, then you move it to the staging, finally you move it to the production. So there are 2 challenges here. Basically, there is a slow deployment cycle because by the time you go to the production, we are already late. And the other challenge is maybe the users are confronted with a lot of changes. basically this is the big bang approach. You are actually, when you release it to the production, that's the time the users are going to experience the new feature. So, so there is a requirement for the modern deployment pattern. This is where modern deployment patterns can help you to speed up the software delivery. So let's imagine you have an opportunity where you can test your application while your application running on the production. That's where these deployment patterns is going to help us, and we are going to see how you can how we can implement these patterns, and you can see what are the patterns which you could use in your scenario. All right, so let's talk about blue-green deployment. So in the blue-green deployment, basically let's imagine you have an application which is production application which is running on the first instance, which is basically blue. And let's imagine you are planning to deploy some changes and you are planning to release some changes. And what you can do, you can have the another instance. The another instance is as a temporary instance. So you have an ability to release it on the second instance, and you can simply route the traffic from one instance to the another instance. And in case if you feel that there is a major issue, then you can easily revert it from the temporary instance to the master instance. So how do we implement this pattern? So Azure DevOps, and and if you look at the Azure App Services, Azure App Services will give you an ability to implement these features through deployment slots. So I'm going to show you in few minutes to how you can use this deployment slot and how you can implement this feature. The second option is Canary Release. Canary Release, it's very similar to blue-green deployment, but then in the Canary Release, you have a two instance. The first instance where basically you have an existing application, and the second instance where you have the new instance is going to be running. So what you can do here is you can ask your you can do the small traffic routing. So by doing the traffic routing, the small set of users is going to access the second version, and then you can continuously get the feedback from the second instance. Basically, you use the tools like application insight. You can get the telemetry data from your applications, and you can continuously look for an improvement. So how do you implement this pattern? Again, you can use the deployment slots, and also you can use the traffic routing, and also you can use the features like a feature toggles. So this is the second model. The next one is A/B testing. So there are some scenarios where you can implement the A/B testing. So let's imagine you have an application and you wanted to evaluate two different versions. So let's say variant A and variant B. So what you can do is you can put these instances into the into two separate instances, and you can do the 50-50 routing. 50% users request can go to the variant A, and then the rest of 50% traffic can go to the second variant. And then you can continuously in the background, you can continuously make use of the application insights to get the telemetry data and evaluate which variant is performing well. And then accordingly, you pick that variant and you move to the production. So this is basically A/B testing. The other deployment pattern is basically dark launching. So the dark launching is basically, it's very similar to Canary Release, but then the point here is your single application instance, it can support two variants. By the way, in order to implement this pattern, you have to develop an application such a way that you have to make the necessary changes on the application code so that you can support it. Even Azure does have the app configurations features flag. That feature helps you to meet this dark launching capabilities. So let's take a look at how you can practically implement these patterns into your scenario. So I'm going to look at my existing application. So let's imagine you are planning to do a blue-green deployment. So in this case, I have a production instance. So what I can do, I'm inside my app service instance. So inside the app service instance, so there is a feature called deployment slot. So the deployment slot basically give you an ability to add additional slot inside your application. So what you can do, you can create a slot, which is, for example, this is green deployment. So what you, technically speaking, what you do here, you add additional instance inside the deployment slot, and then you will have a DevOps pipeline, and DevOps pipeline will have an integration to the respective slot where your new variant is going to deploy here. And then there is a component called traffic routing. So you have an ability to route the traffic in case if you feel you wanted to route the 100% traffic to the new instance, then you can apply these changes and see how your application is performing. As long as the application performs well, yes, you can make this as a production. In case if you have any issues, you can revert the changes. So you have an ability to swap from Canary to production, productions to Canary. So these are the great capabilities of the deployment slots. So when you do the AB blue-green deployment, you can make use of deployment slots and the traffic routing. So in the Canary release, again, it's very similar to what you are doing here. But then in the Canary release, basically the idea is you just release it to the very small subset of users. Maybe you start from 10%, then you slowly increase this to 20%, then 30%. Then meanwhile, you also have to get the necessary telemetry data from the applications and see how your users are performing. And we are going to look at the feedback mechanisms in the second in the coming slides. So this is the example for the Canary release. In the A/B testing, what you do, A/B testing, you basically you do the 50-50 routing. So 50-50 routing, where first instance will of users will receive the one instance, and the next set of users will receive the another instance. So basically you evaluate, so which variant is going to be super performing. Accordingly, you pick that particular variant and you move to the production. So
sorry,
now there
Anthony, I just want to quickly jump in here. For the content that is showing on the screen, some people might need to adjust the playback settings. So there is a button on the corner right at the bottom where it can adjust the quality. This is for them to select the highest quality so that they can see the text and the different parts on the screen. And on your end, yes, that will be great. If you can zoom in into the content being shown on the dashboard, that will be great. Thank you. That's a quick note only. Great. So now let's talk about dark launching. So dark launching, as I said, in the difference between the Canary release or the A/B testing. So we are basically having two instances, and the one instance supports the legacy version, the second instance support the modern version. But here in the dark launching, basically you have an ability to build your application such a way that your single instance can support multiple versions. So Azure does provide the app configurations where you can control who are the users are going to receive the second variant and who are the users going to receive the first variant. So you can control, which is called, we call it as a feature flag or the feature toggles. So let me just show you how you can configure the feature, feature toggles. So as you see here, app configurations. In fact, one of the limitation with this dark launching is basically your application code must support this capability. So basically, the developer has to get the necessary modules and make sure that your application understand the dark launching capabilities, so that you can make use of the app configurations wizard in order to route the traffic to the respective users. So app configurations, it's one of the tools which basically supports the dark launching capabilities, but also there are many tools available in the marketplace. Even in the Visual Studio marketplace, you can make use of the other tools as well. So here, for example, if I want to, basically
assume I have applications ready. I have a concept called a feature manager. In this feature manager, I have an ability to decide how I'm going to do the feature flag. So let's imagine here. So testing. So here I have several options. So I can, enable these features based on certain Active Directory group. I can enable this feature based on certain routing, traffic routing, or I can still route I can add these features based on certain time window. So this app configuration let you choose the desired mode that you need. So based on this, you can enable the feature anytime for the new set of users. Also, as part of this dot launching, there is a concept called progressive exposure. So the progressive exposure, basically, it is also called ring-based deployment. So ring-based deployment means you internally you decide the process where how many rings you want to have in your company, maybe internal users, early adopters, and your corporate users. So what you can do, through this feature flag, what we have discussed here, through this feature flag, you can control how you are going to increase these features to your group of your corporate users. So initially you release it to their small set of users, which is Canary. Then you can increase this to early adopters. Then you can increase this to your whole employees sets. So it's totally depends on how you wants to expose this features to your companies, your corporate users. Accordingly, you can choose the design the respective model. All right, so that's all about deployment pattern. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to take a look at the feedback mechanism. How we can get the feedback from your applications, from your users, and from your employees and your customers. So choosing the right deployment pattern, it is something the business has to, the customer has to decide. So based on your scenario, you can choose the appropriate deployment pattern, which can definitely accelerate the software deployment. So now let's move on to the feedback mechanism. So as we know, the ultimate goal of DevOps is to accelerate the continuous delivery, so accelerate the application deployment and improve the overall services. So there is a need for creating a feedback loop. So feedback loop, basically, you can collect the feedback from various stages. If you look at the DevOps stages, there is a planning, there is a code, there is a build, test, release, monitor. So to build a feedback loop, you have to receive the feedback from your users, you have to receive the feedback from your developers, you have to receive the feedback from your employees, you have to receive the feedback from partners and your applications. So if you look at this here, in the initial stages like a code build, you have to continuously receive the feedback from the developers, and you have to make sure that the build that goes to the testing, the build that goes to the release, that have the limited bugs or no bugs. Now, as we move towards the test and release, you have to have a mechanism where you can continuously seek the feedback from from your users, from your employees, so that you can incorporate the necessary changes, so that when it goes to the final release, it can have the great product. And once it is go to the market, still you have to have a mechanism that should collect the feedback from the application, something like the app response time, the latency, the more insights from the applications. And now we are going to see how you can create the feedback loops. Basically there are two loops, which is inner loop and outer loop. So inner loop is basically something which you collect from the developers, and the outer loop is something which you take from your employees, your customers, and your partners, right? So there are several tools which is available, and if you look at the Azure product is well instrumented to receive the telemetry data from one another. So let's talk about the various tools what we have, and the how we can seek the feedback from the various places. Okay, so let's start from developers, right? So to get the necessary feedback from the developers. Of course, there are several ways. I'm just highlighting some of the key components what we can predominantly use here. So test and feedback extension. So test and feedback extension, it's a lightweight plugin which you can install it on your browser, yeah. And using this extension, you can easily provide the feedback to to your project. So let's imagine we are working on a project. So I know from my browser, I can simply add a work item, and the work item will get updated in the DevOps board, and then which will get, the developers or the other set of developers can look at the work item, and then they can work on it. Then Azure Monitor and Application Insights. So App Insights is basically it's basically helps you to monitor your live applications, and you can evaluate the response time, you can evaluate the failure rate, any runtime exceptions, and any page views. So it provides the great insights about the applications. And I'm going to show you how we can configure this and how we can get the data and update as a work item in the Azure DevOps. Now, from the customer perspective, so customer perspective, basically once the application is released to let's imagine the application is released to the productions, and you wanted to understand the user sentiment, how the users are thinking about your product, right? So there are some marketplace extensions available, which is Twitter Sentiment Release Kit. So using this Twitter Sentiment Release Kit, you get an ability to understand what customer thinking about your product. So you can easily get the Twitter sentiments, which you can connect on the deployment gates. So before you release something to the other stages, of course, you can understand what the customers or the users thinking about the product. And feedback from applications, of course, the Azure Application Insights, which basically using this application insights, you can collect the telemetry data from the applications, and you can publish the work item from the app insights. You can also automate the alerting mechanisms. So let's go and explore how we can use these tools, like which we can collect if the feedback from the developers and the customers and the applications. Okay, so let's talk about the test and feedback extension. So last discussion, we have created a DevOps project, which is where we had a pipeline basically, and we have some work item. Now let's imagine this is our website. And as a developers, we are testing this website, and we wanted to give an instant feedback to the DevOps project. So what we can do here, for example, I have a test and feedback extension, which is installed for my browser. In case if you don't have it, you can get it from the Visual Studio Marketplace. The name is test and feedback extension. So in this case, I have installed my test and feedback extension. So what I can do here is, for example, let's imagine I have I have identified some bugs in my browser, or in this application. What I can do to provide the feedback to my project, so I can just do it from here. So let's imagine this is the extension. So I'm gonna create a bug. So let's say screen resolution is low. So I can take a screenshot. Be fixed. So I'm going to save this. So as soon as I save this, you see here, there is a bug item which gets reflected in the Azure DevOps project. And from this point onwards, your team can take up this work, and you can, yeah, you see here the work item is get updated here. So the point is the test and feedback extension is the great tool. Using this, your team can instantly provide the necessary feedback back to your DevOps project. Now let's talk about the second aspect, which is how you can implement the get the feedback from the customers, right? So as I discussed, there is a gate which is called deployment gate, which you can configure on your pipeline. So by default, when you look at this, you don't find it, but you can install this extension from the, for example, if you go here, you by default, you don't find it, but yes, you can install this Twitter sentiment analysis. So basically the idea is when you release this product, to your users, basically this, from this gate, before you approve this particular stage, before it goes to the next stage, you can get the sentiment, as long as if your employees or your customers tweeting about the particular product or using any hashtag, you can understand, basically this connects to the Azure Cognitive Services, where it actually leveraging the other machine learning models to understand what sentiment it is. Is it a positive sentiment or is it a negative sentiment? You can instantly get the sentiment from your deployment gate, so which can help you to make a decision. So that's all about getting the feedback from the customers. And also, of course, you can use the standard email survey or any other mechanisms to get the feedback from the customers. The next one is get the feedback from the applications, how you can integrate the application insights into the DevOps and how you can get the feedback mechanisms. So App Insights, it's a great tool where that can give you the great insight about the applications. So let's get into the App Insight now. So let's imagine we have a stage application and where App Insight is connected. So this is my application insight component. So application insight have a plenty of great features, which is application map, smart detection, live metrics, stream, and failures. So I did reproduce some data, which I have it. I can find it in the performance. So basically, I have generated some traffic to my website, and if I look at my last 7 days data, I see here some point the performance is huge, and I see the latency is on the higher side. Now let's imagine the server has not, or the instance has not responded on time, and there is a huge latency. So what you can do here, as you explore these, this specific instance, you can, in fact, as a developer, when you look at the performance metrics, when you look at the failures, so you have an ability to instantly create a work item from the application itself. So for example, in this case, I'm gonna create a work item. So let's say performance issue detected more than 400 milliseconds. So I'm gonna create a work item. Now, if you go back to the, of course, if you go back to the your Azure boards, so you can see the work item is created, performance issue detected. So in order to configure this, you have to integrate the application insights and your DevOps project. So how do you integrate? You can go back to your application insights, where you can find the work item. So in this work item, you have to have the template. If you don't have the template, you can create a template. In this template, you just have to provide the DevOps project URL, and you just have to provide the project details, where you can easily integrate the app insights and the a DevOps project so that your work item can be directly created from the app insights. So now the next question probably you may have, how do I automate? So in order to automate these things, you can use the service like Logic App. So Logic App is basically it's our process automation service. It is part of the app service plan, and you can have the Logic App, and Logic App can respond to any triggers. So there are some connectors for Logic App. There are some connectors for DevOps. So you can use the Logic App tool, and Logic App can make a API connection, API query, and see if there is any performance issues or if there is any errors reported, and those things can be updated into the DevOps project. So let me show you the sample Logic Apps, what I have here. Okay, so I see I have a Logic App here, which is App Insights to DevOps. Now, if I go here in the Logic App Designer, I just wanted to show you very few things, which is here I have a this particular Logic App is going to basically it's going to get some insights. Basically, this is going to put a query against the API, the application insights API, and then you can put a condition, what you wanted to update. So let's imagine you are evaluating some performance. Maybe you can say the specific parameter and put the right threshold, and it can query the specific things in every certain minutes, and then you have a connector which is basically create DevOps connector. So using this DevOps connector, you can create a work item. So how do we configure the API access? Well, say Azure App Insights does provides the API. So in order to configure this, you need an API key. So when you create a Logic App, you have to provide the API key. The API key, you can generate it inside your application insight. The application insight, there is something called API access. In this API access, and you can create an API key, and basically this key is nothing but the name and the key that you generate. And then once you have the key, you can pass this value to the Logic App so that it can be integrated. So let's quickly go back and see if there is any question. So how do we map the browser extension to DevOps for the feedback? Also, can we map this to other source control outside DevOps? So this test and feedback mechanism, it is actually which you can take it from the Visual Studio Marketplace, which is well integrated into the DevOps. So when you install the plugin, there are the plugins available for Edge browser, the plugin available for Mozilla, plugin available for Chrome. So when you install the plugin, you just have to provide the basic details, which is your DevOps server URL. As long as you provide the right DevOps server URL, you will be able to integrate this with the Azure DevOps. Okay, so the other questions, which pattern data utilization sessions, user counts, deployment using shared traffic between instances. Okay, so when you create a pipeline, for let's imagine you are creating some pattern. Let's imagine you have some pattern which is blue-green testing or Canary Release. So if you look at your pipeline, in the pipeline you have an ability to run the task. So let me go back to my release pipeline. So when you do some trigger, basically when you deploy something, let's imagine you wanted to do the traffic routing. So how do you do the traffic routing? You can have the task. The task can be Azure CLI. So in the Azure CLI, this is what is going to happen is basically this is going to run some command line. It's going to update some command line. So you can say, let's say bash. So you can say, for example, AZ web app. You can put the command which is going to perform the traffic routing. Similarly, you can identify the list of tasks that you wanted to perform as part of this pipeline. You can incorporate into the into your existing pipeline. All right, so let's go back. Okay, so now let's go back quickly. So now we took a look at how we can use the test and feedback extension, application insights, and the sentiment analysis. So now what I'm going to do, let's have a quick understanding about Azure Monitor and how Azure Monitor is going to be useful when it comes to monitoring your whole solution. So basically, Azure Monitor is the cloud native monitoring tool that comes from the Azure platform. So using this tool, you can monitor in your resources. It can be any applications, it can be VM, it can be web application. So basically two things which is important for Azure Monitor, which is metrics and logs. So metrics is all about some aspect of the system, which is something like CPU utilization, HTTP queue length, memory utilization, and so on. The log is something who did what. It's some information about a specific event. So these metrics and logs, which are very important when it comes to the monitoring solution. And what Azure offers here is there are plenty of tools. You may see the app insights, log analytics, logic app. Now, how this works is basically your resources have the metrics and logs, and you have an ability to pass that metrics and logs to centrally store the metrics and logs, which is basically log analytics workspace. So the log analytics workspace is the place where we can store the metrics and logs. Now, let me show you how you can pass this metrics and logs to the log analytics workspace. So let's imagine this is my web application, and now let's imagine I wanted to centrally store this metrics and logs in the log analytics workspace. So what I have to do here, there is something called diagnostic settings. So if you look at this diagnostic settings, you can select the list of metrics that you wanted to pass. So in this case, so let's imagine I'm selecting all the metrics. And so I have an option here, send to log analytics. So I have an option here. So what I'm going to do with these metrics, so I can store it on the log analytics workspace. And also I can stream to an event hub in case if I want to pass this to a streaming mechanism, which is event hub, I do have an option. Or if you want to archive your logs, you still do it. But generally, what we do, we will pass the logs and metrics to the workspace, which is called log analytics workspace. So if I talk from the architectural perspective, how this works is, let me just show you another diagram. Okay, so maybe if you look at this, picture, so the metrics and logs, which is important. I mean, every Azure resource will have a metrics and logs. And in order to centrally have the monitoring workspace, what you can do, you can collect the metrics and logs from all the resources, and you can store it in the log analytics workspace. Now, log analytics workspace will give you an ability to write any query. I mean, the query name is KQL, which is Kusto query language. So you can write any query on the log analytics platform against any specific resources. So let's imagine you are collecting the metrics and logs from web app. So as we just showcased how you can collect the metrics and logs from your web app. As long as you are collecting the logs and metrics, which is stored in the log analytics workspace, what you can do here, you can write a query, and that query, let's say you wanted to check what is the availability of the web application. Yes, you can write a query and you can get the availability status. So you can basically write any query to get any data, because this workspace is nothing but a data store, which is all about metrics and logs are stored in the log analytics workspace. Now let's imagine you wanted to enrich the data what you have, or if you have any SIM solution like a Sentinel. The Sentinel, basically you can produce the Sentinel as an input as a log analytics workspace, which can further enrich the data and see if there is any anomalies which is inside the workspace. Now, if you look at from the app insight point of view, so when you create a web app, of course, you can enable the application insight. So app insights, basically, it can provide more insight details, such as how your application is making a connection to the database and what is the call duration. Is there any latency? Is there any runtime exception? Is there any page views failures? So all such details which you can get it from the application insights. And also the good thing is it provides the API access. So as I showed you, you can create an API access and which you can use to integrate with the other services like a Logic app. So assume there is some performance issue detected. So you can periodically run a query, you can get an API, and based on the results, you can invoke the Logic app, which can create a work item in the DevOps, or which can create a ticket into your ticketing system, or which can create a Teams notification. So you can do the amazing things as long as you completely understand how the products are integrated with one another. And keep in mind the Azure services are well integrated with one another to receive the telemetry data from one another. Okay, so that's the kind of high-level overview of Azure Monitor. Now, since we are collecting the feedback from users, feedback from customers, and feedback from applications, the point here is we are trying to create a digital feedback loop. So the digital feedback loop is all about capturing the various digital signals across various places from your users, from your customers, from your applications, and get the insights. So get the insights from the data that you collected, and continuously you look for an improvement and see how you can improve your products, which eventually increases the business outcome. So that's all about the creating the digital feedback loop. And Azure products, it is well integrated with one another. So also this give you the various tools and various services. Using these tools and services, you can easily create a digital feedback loop, and which can greatly support when it comes to DevOps feedbacks adoptions. So that's pretty much about how I wanted to highlight it today, which is deployment patterns and the implementing feedback mechanisms. So hope the session is informative. And in the next session, what we are going to do, we are going to look at the security aspect, all aspects of how you can implement the security and compliance perspective. What are the different tools and what are the ways to meet your security and compliance requirements? So that's pretty much about today's discussion. So let me go back and see if there is any question.
I just dropped the link to the final part of this DevOps series in the Q&A again for everyone to join us. Don't miss on registering for this session. Today's session is recorded, and I have seen recently a few requests for like slides or diagrams that you have presented towards the end. So maybe we can discuss that and share a link to maybe a GitHub slides. Maybe you can push them there after the session. So I'll share it with everyone. Just make sure you are registered on the meetup.
Okay, so we have just updated the one more URL which talks about the application insight. There was a question about what are the data that's collected from the app insights. Yes, we do have the documentation, so that talks about the list of data. Basically, it's about collecting the performance related informations like response time, failure rate, request rate, and there are a lot of metrics basically we are collecting. And in fact, the article which I sent you that have the complete list of informations. So yes, you can read through the article, get more insights about app insights. Okay, so that being said, and we just finished the today's discussion, and thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to talk to you through another discussion. So I do have another question. Will it be possible to do the recording? It's very difficult to read.
Yeah, we can adjust this for next time. The maximum is 720p on the streaming, which is good, but maybe we can leverage. There are some margins around the screen sharing. Maybe we can like adjust things so that we can utilize all the screen. It's a minor thing. We'll adjust it for the next one. No worries. Thanks for the feedback, everyone. And again, make sure you adjust the streaming quality to the maximum so that you can enjoy the best experience during the sessions. All right, we got a couple of more minutes. If you have any questions, you can send them through. I'm just scrolling through the Q&A to make sure that we covered all the questions. Anthony as well. If you notice anything that we can bring up again. Yeah. There was one question about the browser extensions to DevOps for the feedback. Says, can we also map this to other source control outside the DevOps repos?
Yeah, so the feedback, the test and feedback extension, which is available for multiple browsers, but then other, this is basically, we take it from the Visual Studio Marketplace, and it well works with the Azure DevOps service.
And there's a question about other application features such as accessibility. So how can we get feedback about that?
So what about the feedback for different application features like accessibility? Well, so as we discussed, Azure Monitor, in fact, it can collect the various data from your applications as well, your custom applications as well. You can have the necessary agent installed on your custom application machine, again, which can collect the data like metrics and logs, and that can store in the log analytics, and then from log analytics you can write a query to understand more about the specific applications. Is there any recommendation for the learning path? Yes, it is already updated.
Yeah, I shared a few recommendations there, and also I'm going to share one more for you to continue the journey. There was a question about the telemetric send to log analytics. Yeah, so the question is, what are the default telemetric send to log analytics workspace is if it's not configured from app insights?
Okay, so what are the default telemetric sent to log analytics workspace if it is not configured from app insight? So app insight, basically it's a separate resource, and which typically you enable it on top of your existing application. For example, web app. Let's talk about web app. So to enable the app insight, what you do inside the web app, you enable the app insight. And when you enable the app insights, it's a separate resource that gets created. But if you want to pass the data to the log analytics, I don't think we have any diagnostics options where you can pull this informations. But then generally inside the app insights, you get all the details what you need with specific to that specific application. So
I think we're all good with the questions. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for the feedback about these sessions. All are recorded and will be available on YouTube. Part 1, Part 2 are already there, and Part 3 will be soon on a dedicated playlist. I'm just gonna also share it with you here in case you wanna have a look again, catch on anything you have missed, or review any concepts. And also I shared one more link to a Learn module that you can also continue the journey with. So that's all for today. Don't miss the last part next week, where we will be covering the last part on security, compliance, feedback mechanisms, and optimization. So RSVP for that one. And give us also feedback on the Reactor survey. It's the very first link I shared with you. There is an event ID for today's session. I'm just gonna drop it again in the Q&A chat, Q&A tab. So basically, you can just tell us there all the interesting topics that you would love to see at the Reactor, and we'll make sure that we bring that to you in our upcoming programming. That's all for today. Again, thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Anthony, for sharing your experience with our community members. And we look forward to having you again next week for the final part in this 4-part series about DevOps.
Thank you, Hassan. It's my pleasure.
Goodbye, everyone.